Once our prayers rose like incense from the cliffs of Ethiopia, and Mary was crowned in tongues older than empire. Faith and culture moved as one heartbeat.
But then, the heart was torn. We fought wars in Christ's name, while whispering to spirits in the dark. We read the scriptures by day, yet feared the ancestors by night. We wore two faces, Christian and pagan, colonized and free, a soul divided against itself.
My children, a house divided cannot stand. I do not come to erase your songs, but to tune them to the melody of my son. I am the mother who gathers the fragments and leads them back to him.
The fracture runs deep between tribe and church, between colonizer faith and native soil. But in the silence of Mary's yes, Africa can learn to be whole again.
Mother of light, gather my divided heart and carry me to your son.
It goes back to the comment of Nick Fuentes about Africa not being civilized and waiting for white people to civilize it, especially in the Central Africa, the sub-Saharan area or region. And the first part about the civilization in Africa is the role of the colonialism. And I'm not the one to preach being a victim. I like to think that I have the power and being a child of God and being made in God's image through Jesus Christ. But European colonization redrew the borders of African countries without regard for tribal or spiritual cohesion. That led to splitting the tribes, splitting the language, splitting the local governance. As an example, Cameroon and Gabon are two countries that are next to each other, like very much close to each other. And there are certain tribes that are in Gabon and that you can find in Cameroon close to the borders because they share the same languages, the same traditions around it. And that's how we can discover how much it's young, the African identity. And that came for us not even being able to build that national identity first, where everybody see himself as a tribe, not as a nation, right? And that's the shift that is yet to happen, start happening, but not as much. And a lot of resources, the gold, the oil, the cocoa, the diamonds were extracted, not reinvested back into those countries. And that set up a dependency economy towards European countries. I'm just saying it because it's a fact and we need to talk about it. We need to think about it at least. Not as a way to victimize us, just as a way to see that, yes, it happened, but men can do that. Men from any community, any institution can come and exploit because they see what they can gain from that. The power is always the most dangerous thing to have or to experience or to feel. So the missionary schools that came to be around the second wave came as a tool for control, not liberation. So the faith was not being understood in the proper way. I recently started to read a book, African Rediscovered, through a Catholic church missionary that is visiting the Maasai nation and that started to talk about God, Jesus Christ. And in the book, they were saying at the beginning that the big issue is that they started to focus way too much on the education without having to train people the right way and train the priests the right way, the bishops the right way. And that's something that was missed. That is how the school was built up, to train people to say yes, to be obedient, not to be leaders, not to think for themselves, not to think outside of the box. And that's why a lot of people have a hard time nowadays to even start their own things. Starting a business is very hard because if all your life you went to school and you understood that it was good to obey and it was good to say yes to your boss and you didn't need to think by yourself, obviously it's something that's going to be part of your habit. That was the missionary way when it came over to Africa during the second wave. When you start connecting to Christ, you start being a lot more intellectual and a lot more connected to your own reasoning. There's a lot of logic. And it's not random that the first institutions, the hospitals, the universities, places of education, health, were invented by early Christian leaders because they understood through the Bible, through the scripture, through the tradition. God doesn't want us to be slaves to him. He doesn't want that. Jesus came to free us from being slaves, to be obedient to him through our own free will. So we can say yes or we can say no. And through the education, it's something that had to happen. But because of the agenda, not because of the Catholic Church, not because of Christianity, but because of man, a man being thirsty for power, more power, because it's never enough. They decided to use that and add their own things. And not all missionaries were like that, by the way, but you have to recognize that all over the world, not just in Africa, a lot of missionaries, a lot of schools were built up that way for the youth to not think outside of the box. And I'm not saying that everybody should be an entrepreneur. I'm saying that a lot of people that even have that potential, they can't because they have the mindset about just going with the wave, going along with the rest of the group. If the mass says yes, they're gonna say yes. If the mass says no, they're gonna say no, because they want to please. And we have that in us, to please, to be polite, nice to each other, to the point of erasing the gift that God gave us. The Christianity was learned in a way to replace your identity, not transform it at all. But also, the post-colonial leaders often failed to rebuild the patriotism, and many became corrupt elites. A lot of names of intellectual leaders that love the countries, and they would disappear. Just like that. The government doesn't help much. They want to have their own profit, and it's pretty much it for them. They couldn't care less about the rest. The tribal rivalries too and the religious tensions didn't help. They were inflamed by colonial favoritism, the full civil wars that we have today. You think about Rwanda, you think about Sudan, you think about Nigeria. And that got to build even more of the lack of trust towards Christianity and the Catholic Church especially. The colonization planted the roots, but we have not fully uprooted the weeds. That includes the spiritual confusion that we left behind. The positive of Christianity arriving in Africa, especially with the second wave, was that Christianity revealed a personal God, not just spirits or forces in the nature or having that cosmic balance. The gospel dignified the person, the human. So the slave, the orphan woman, leper, they were all humans being made in God's image. It introduced the eternal hope, the forgiveness, and universal brotherhood. So it's not about your tribe, it's not about the nation, it's all about the community all over the world. Something that I love about the Catholic Church. You go in Cameroon, you go in France, you come in Montreal, you go in any other province in Canada or any other country in Europe, you're gonna see a mix of ethnicities. You're gonna see a mix of communities. You can see an Indian, you can see a Cameroonian, you can see a Kenyan, a Greek, and they come there and they're sharing the same sacrifice, they're sharing the Eucharist, they are all part of the body of Christ, they are all part of the church with the same mercy, with the same love, the same unity, and that makes everybody be whole again. And that's what Jesus wants, being part of the church, not multiple churches within the church, a church, global physical church. And the Catholic Church represents the best of it in terms of the fullness of it. It's not about just being black with black or white with white. It's warm. It's something that is just welcoming to me. In my church, you can see older generation, younger generation, but all talking, all getting along, all loving each other through the love of Christ. How can you not love the Catholic Church because of it? Anyways, Christ replaced fear with freedom. No longer bound by ancestral curses or blood rituals. I feel a lot of us, we still stuck onto that, into being scared of the ancestors and all the curses. It's a real thing. In Africa, many Africans were taught that being Christian equals to being Western. And when you start associating the Catholic Church with being Western, what do you think is going to happen? Of course, you want to reject that as well, because you don't want to be part of the West anymore. You want to be your own way. You want to be independent. You want to go back to your roots. And for you, it's to reject all of that. Christianity was sometimes seen as an imported religion and not their own. So they didn't find a way to appropriate it themselves and see that as a part of their own identity. And some Christianities rejected all feats, saint imagery, stripping worship of beauty and story. I talked about the Protestant Reformation. They did all of that, even in Africa. So that left many Africans with a fractured identity. I'm Christian, but I can't see myself in it. In terms of what really prevents Africa to be fully Christian and developed today, there's many reasons, mixed reasons. It starts with the dualism and the syncretism in a bad way. Many are Christian on Sunday, but traditional by crisis. You see a lot of ethnicities in Cameroon still playing in both rivers. They're Christian, they're going to Mass, they're experiencing that, they know it is helpful, otherwise they wouldn't come. But when there's a crisis, when there's an issue, something coming, Jesus can't help them anymore. They go back to their own habits. So they are more scared of the ancestors than being freed from Jesus Christ's blood, mercy, love. And a lot of Africans, they are in that mix today, a lot of. They use everything from their own local traditions and rites and rituals when there's specific situations, and would not even see Christ there. And we see that as normal, as being part of Christianity, because they never were necessarily truly taught that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. They didn't have that knowledge of having Christ and seeing Christ as the Lord and being above of all of the deities, the spirits, the ancestors. They didn't see that. And having a talk with my mom, she reminded me of the parents of my grandma. That were the first Christian in sub-Saharan Africa being converted with the second wave, the Catholic missionaries. It doesn't go further than 2-3 generations up. They don't understand how much it is important to not dabble with anything that is the demonic part of our own traditions. And sometimes my mom would tell me that a lot of people nowadays, they are thinking that they are going back to the roots, but they don't know what roots they're talking about, because a lot of it that got destroyed. Everything was oral. There's a lot less people nowadays that actually fully know their own traditions. You start mixing up a lot of things that you think you know and things that you're discovering, but you being told that is part of the local traditions and part of the traditions. So you start mixing up the new age, just like here in the West, thinking it's the truth, thinking is your way to go back to your roots. That Jesus is a lie. We see accident in Cameroon, situations that you're gonna hear about. People that were dabbling into that and things happen, not in a good way. And sometimes you don't even have you being alive to regret that. They would come to church to use whatever is from the church and trying to mix that up with the local culture, the local traditions in a bad way, in the own way, because they feel like they know so much. So that is very ingrained and that is very dangerous. I'm talking about Africa. I can talk about a lot of continents that do that. Latin American, they do the same thing. When you think about Santa Muerte, and I'm going to talk about it, there's a lot of mixing up of things under the cover of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is not even aware of what's happening. If they were, they would stop it right from the get-go. So on top of that, you have a deep fear for the ancestral spirits, the curses, or spiritual attacks that leads to mixing Christianity with all the rites. That's what I was talking about. Because of that fear of the ancestors, you coming up with your own recipe. Because Christianity is not enough. It's not fast enough. It's not strong enough. It's not powerful enough. That gives an incomplete conversion and not a spiritual authority, because you become your own God. Another problem too is the churches that have not enough training. With the Catholic Church in Africa being put aside and the revival of a lot of small congregations, Protestant congregations, to be honest, there's not enough training. They don't know the fullness of the faith. So whatever they transmit to you is something that they think they know, but they don't fully know. And I'm not putting all the priests and all the bishops into the same basket. Some of them are amazing. And that's why you see a lot more African priests coming over to the West than the other way around, because Christianity is dying in West. The post-modern, the post-Christian era is in the West at the moment. But without the proper formation, there's a lot of small congregations and they think they're preaching the Bible, but when you start listening to them, you're really questioning a lot. Close to my mom's house, we have, and I think they're still there, I'm not sure, but when I was living in Cameroon back then, there was a small congregation, Protestant to my understanding, and they would sing all day, even during the night. They were preaching about the Bible, but there was nothing about something that was honest. It was really about the economy. The pastor was there to collect the money more than anything else. And when you see the poverty in African countries, a lot of them, of course, when you're poor, you're desperate. So if you got a pastor that comes and tell you that by giving that money you're gonna be saved, it's like prosperity gospel, pretty much. It's what's happening. So a lot of people come there with a lot of high hopes because they want to get out of the poverty, they want to leave the country, they want to have better positions into their own careers, even in the country. So they would go there and they would give the money more and more because it's still the exchange and zeal mindset, and not necessarily think about the mercy of God. So a lot of them are being manipulated, sadly enough, and that goes through the emotional preaching that replaces the catechesis. The generation before we thoroughly catechized, it opened the door with a lot of smaller churches that were not Catholic, more Protestant, that would have and create their own authority over people, and they would start preaching through emotions. And when you're desperate, what do you think is going to happen? When you go to the Catholic Church, the press is not going to try to promise you a good life because you're going to come to church every Sunday, or because you're going to give more money than somebody else, you're going to have a better life. No, it's not happening. Yes, there were abuses, but that's not what any priest is going to preach today in a Catholic church in Cameroon, at the very least. So a lot of people, because they want to hear things that they want to hear and they are all emotional about it, and opens the door for a lot of mad or ill morally people to exploit them, to manipulate them. All the pastors opening their churches and trying to get as many people as possible because they want to collect the money. And again, I'm not saying that all those congregations, all of them do that. It's a good, great Protestant churches that do good things. But a lot of them, especially the most recent that literally popping up everywhere in African countries, usually it's about the money. The prosperity gospel teaches the escape, not virtue. It's not about being virtuous. It's not about building up that mercy, that charity, that love. No, it's about having money. It's about being rich. It's about not being poor anymore. And all comes down to that. It becomes a prosperity gospel in the American way. And with the influence of America, that's normal that it starts to develop even more now. The faith becomes private breakthrough, not public transformation. It's all about yourself. It's all about like you, and not that public transformation that you could see from saints, martyrs, that were able to change a whole nation. You think about Saint Josephine of Bakita, it's not the same story. It's that economic pressure too that came to slow down the development and the full Christian needy of people, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. Corruption is normalized, and that is true. Again, in Cameroon, you can literally pay a cop if you're missing, let's say, a paper and he's controlling you. He realizes that you don't have all the papers, or there's something that is missing. The guy, any person, is just gonna pay the cop, and he's gonna be on the side. Nobody knows, and he's gonna be like, no, I didn't see anything. Go on, do whatever you want. I don't know you. Thank you for the beer that you gave me today. It's so open nowadays with the cops. They're not even gonna come to you and be like, oh, maybe you should pay. No. They're gonna come to you very open. When I was with my dad and we'd go to do groceries and things like that, literally the cop would come to him and be like, oh, boss, you have nothing for me today? You don't want to give me anything? How about my beer today? Maybe you want to help me out with that. It's something that is so open, they're not ashamed of that. Everybody does that. Not just the cops, but in any part of the country. Recently, I had my sister telling me about her doing some paperwork. She needed to do something specific, but that person was not there. And she was so disappointed because that means for her that she had to come back. But she got called by a random guy in front of the office telling her to go see another guy that maybe could help her out. That was not somebody that was paid to do what she wanted to do, but he could help her out. In exchange, she would pay a bit more and she would have the things a little bit faster rather than waiting for days or weeks if the main person was not there. Things like that, it's every day. It's not to say that it's just bad, but to say that Yes, it happens. It's not just because of colonization. We have bad habits that we need to change. And I would see that every day. You have young people chasing survival, not sanctity. When you try to survive and you're trying to pay the bill or pay for your rent, you're not even thinking about sanctity, because you were not taught that God and Jesus was the center of all of that. Seeing that suffering as a way for you to being sanctified through the blood of Christ, it's you suffering, simply, just suffering. So you're not gonna try to understand it and trying to be sanctified about it. You're not gonna go back to God. This is how young people are suffering today, so they are surviving more than anything else. The faith is really seen as a path to develop political or cultural power. We see the Catholic Church in a way, in a corner, but we don't see that being a full part of the national identity. And at the same time, we don't even see our own national identity that way because it's very young. So putting all the pieces together, it's hard. So everything is at its place, but we just don't connect. The worst thing for me that kind of just breaks my heart even more is that lack of Marian model of nationhood. It doesn't exist anymore in African countries. Because unlike Orthodoxy or Catholicism, many African Christians lack a mother in their spiritual life. And that is probably one of the biggest loss of Protestant churches, Protestant congregations, colonization, the lack of trust, the tensions. We pay the costs, but we pay a big cost. Because when you lack that spiritual mother, you don't know where to see yourself. If you don't have your mother, your biological mother, usually it can affect you greatly. Now when you think about a spiritual mother, we have that rooted in us, in our own identity. The early ways we already had Mary, and we got robbed of her. And you see that today, and you see how people are honestly struggling. She leads you straight to Jesus. Mary is not just a devotional figure. She is a model for a nation, faithful, poor, courageous, exalted. Because she suffered. She was not rich. She was poor. She had to leave and hide in Egypt because Herod wanted to kill her son. From the first couple of months and years, saying yes, she already had a lot of struggles. And she never abandoned her faith because she was suffering. And she was a woman, obedient, virgin, graceful, even when suffering. She never complained. She never said that, I can't take it anymore, take it. No. She stayed in front of Jesus up until the last day. And that's something that is such a great example, especially when we go through those challenges. Because yes, we didn't ask that to happen. And we can blame the white people all the time. And as much as you want to blame white people, you need to blame your own people as well. And you need to kind of think about yourself and what you can do, rather than just blaming everybody else. Blaming racism, blaming the manipulation, blaming people exploiting your lands. Yes, it happens. But then what? Are you going to keep blaming those people, hating them, saying, no, they need to go. They need to disappear. We don't want them in our countries anymore. Okay, then what? Is that going to bring any magic into our countries being developed and being strong? No. You live Christianity, you're doing just like the West part. You're dying. That's what happens. That's why it's happening now. A lot of people are so happy when they see European countries dying, especially African people, and they don't even see the own way of going there by starting to do exactly what the West is doing. It just takes more time because there's still a strong spiritual roots there, but it can be as fast or it can take time, but it's still gonna get there if we don't change the course of going back to God and going back to Jesus and stop dabbling and playing. It's him or him, pretty much. So you choose. I chose my team. I don't know for you. I'm just highly suggesting to choose Jesus. He's the best thing. I already won. Just saying. So the issue is not that Africa is too poor to be Christian, but that Africa has not yet let the gospel fully baptize her culture, her memory, and her dignity. Mary was placed at the center of art, the relics, the church architecture. And she was not only seen as Mother of God or Christ, but she was seen as Mother of Africa. The liturgical life was centered around feasts like the Dormition, the Nativity of Mary, and feasts of the Ark. Fasts such as the Filseta 15-day Marian fast in Ethiopia were happening a lot. It was very popular. She never was a distraction. She was a door to Christ, and you putting Mary at the place of Christ, that's a distortion. That's a twist. That's something that should not happen. Even the Catholic Church wouldn't allow that. She grounded the African identity in divine motherhood, not fear, not tribal fear. Where Marian devotion is strong, the faith is deeper, vocations grow, and families hold together. The Catholic Church introduced the rosary widely, statues and shrines were built, but it was already there as well with the early waves. Operations like Our Lady of Kibeho in Rwanda reinforced the devotion. With the Protestant Reformations, they focused only on Mary as Jesus' biological mother, no more, no less. Marian hymns, statues, and traditions were removed. The West and South Africa, where Protestantism was strong, Marian theology became minimal or absent. The Marian suspicion widened the divide between early Christianity and modern missionary Christianity. This wasn't restoration, it was rupture. Protestants saw Marian devotion as idolatry, missing its incarnational logic. Catholics failed to reroute Mary into African theology. She then became a European statue, not an African mother. She lost that essence of the African mother that she had before. Mary becomes the key to Christianity in Africa for many reasons. Because for me, when we lose Mary, we lose more than a mother. We lose the church heart. And the Marian devotion protected African Christianity through a lot: Islamic invasion, colonial trauma, and modern confusion. When you go back to Mary, the direction is pretty much straight up to Christ. She protects you. What Mary gave to Africa was a woman who understands suffering, a queen mother who stands beside her children, a bridge between the human and the divine, and a refuge in cultures that still respect maternal wisdom, which is strong, beautiful, and powerful by itself. You don't need to replace the man. It's not something that we discovered today. And that's why I think there's a lot of hope. I love my continent, and I'm so proud to be African. And some people might find it surprising for me to say that, because I'm not somebody that's gonna be all like pro-black or African. I'm not. I'm just not. I'm Christian first. I'm a child of God. I was made in God's image with my baptism, and I fully find my place there. I'm fully at peace with that. Now, it doesn't mean that the work is finished. It means that this embrace of my culture and love of my culture, that's gonna make me more in love with Christ by going even through my own culture, because that helps me build that identity. So if you're that person looking for that identity and you look to all the places, the New Age, atheism, culture, it could be just a culture, being pro-black, being pro-Africa, and just blaming all the white people, hating the white people for whatever they've done to you, or to Africa, or to other parts of the world. It's not just Africa. And you have the call. You have the call to go back. You're missing something. You want to be online. You want to have a voice. And you're struggling. You're truly struggling to have that voice, to embrace your own culture and reconciliating with Christ. This series, this channel is going to be the place for you. Because not only I'm going deeper to history because I love history, just my opinion, but I want to help people that way and really embracing their culture wherever they are, wherever they come from, and being able to get rid of the pagan part, the true pagan part. And my Rosary Challenge is an exciting way to start. It opens the door to so much more because you get to understand the Rosary, pray the Rosary daily, the story behind the Rosary, and that gives you access to our club, the Rosary Sisterhood Rebel Club, where we pray the Rosary, we read the Bible, we do Bible studies, we do read a lot of books because we want to understand. If you are curious, as curious as me, you want to understand as much as possible, and you want to have the truth. And when I say the truth, not your truth, not my truth, the truth. We do all of that. And I'm a coach myself, so I help people getting confident in front of the camera, finding the voices through being all on God, God-focused, God-centered. even with your own culture. So if that's something that calls you, you know what to do. Everything is going to be down below, and I have a QR code that you can scan to have access to it. I can't wait to talk to more of you, and welcome to all of the new people that get to subscribe to this channel, because you definitely found something that was useful, and I'm happy about it. I'm gonna see you for my next episode, and like I say all the time, keep smiling because it's free and contagious in a good way. Bye.